He grabbed the microphone before the best man even sat down. I was standing near the back of the reception hall, still holding a glass of water I hadn't touched, when my daughter-in-law walked to the center of the room and tapped the mic twice. The chatter died. A few hundred people turned to look at her. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her dark hair pinned up in a way that made her look like she belonged on the cover of something. She smiled at the crowd. That wide, practiced smile I'd seen her use on everyone who wasn't me, and she said, "Before we get to the toasts, I just want to take a moment to welcome everyone to our special day, especially those of you who came from further away." She paused. Her eyes moved across the room and landed on me. My father-in-law drove up this morning, all the way from Akron. Another pause, longer this time. You can probably still smell the motor oil. A few people laughed. Not many, but enough. Enough that I felt it in my chest. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just stood there in my gray slacks and my old flannel button-down, the one my wife had bought me the Christmas before she passed, and I let the moment happen. My son was sitting at the head table. He looked down at his plate. He looked down at his plate. He looked down at his plate. That's the part I keep coming back to, even now. Not what she said. Not the laughter. Just that image of my boy, 29 years old, staring at a plate of chicken marsala, while his wife made his father the punchline at his own wedding. My name is Hank. Henry, technically, but nobody's called me that since my mother. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a machinist at a manufacturing plant outside of Akron, Ohio. I know what my hands look like. I know what I look like. A little thick around the middle now. Gray at the temples, more comfortable in work boots than dress shoes. I didn't own a suit that still fit right. I'd meant to buy one. I just kept putting it off, and then the week of the wedding got busy and I told myself it didn't matter. It's my son's wedding, I thought. He'll just be glad I'm there. I was wrong about that too. My son. I'll call him my son because that's what he is, even now. Had been with his wife for 3 years before they got engaged. I'd met her twice. Once at a birthday dinner his girlfriend's family hosted at a steakhouse in Columbus, where her father, a man I'll call my daughter-in-law's father, ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than my electric bill and made a point of telling me so. The second time was Christmas the year before the wedding, when they came to Akron for exactly 4 hours, long enough to open presents and eat a sandwich and get back on the road. She was polite to me those times. Careful the way people are when they're performing for an audience. She asked me questions about my work. She laughed at the right moments. But I noticed things. The way her eyes moved around my house, taking inventory. The way she said, "That's charming," about my kitchen. The kitchen my wife had decorated with sunflowers and blue tile, like it was something in a museum, something old and quaint and someone else's problem. Her family had money. Her father ran a logistics company he'd inherited from his own father and then grown considerably, at least according to what my son told me. They lived in a suburb of Cleveland where the driveways were longer than my backyard. Her mother wore jewelry to casual dinners. They were the kind of people who used the word summer as a verb. And then there was me, a machinist from Akron with rough hands and a truck with 200,000 miles on it and a flannel shirt at a wedding reception. After she made her joke, the evening went the way you'd expect. Her father gave a toast that was mostly about his daughter and mentioned my son about 4 times, and never mentioned me at all. Her mother pulled my daughter-in-law aside for photos constantly, arranging the new couple with her family like they were posing for a portrait, and I stood at the edge of things, eating a dinner roll, watching my son get absorbed into a world that didn't have a lot of room for where he came from. I found my son once during the cocktail hour. I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, "Congratulations. I mean it. I hope you're happy." He said, "Thanks, Dad. Sorry about earlier. She didn't mean anything by it. She didn't mean anything by it. She didn't mean anything by it." I nodded. I said I understood. And then his father-in-law materialized at his elbow with 2 glasses of scotch, and my son turned toward him like a plant turning toward the sun. And that was the last real conversation we had that night. I left before the cake was cut. Drove back to Akron in the dark, 3 hours on 77th South with the radio off. I stopped at a gas station outside of Canton and bought a cup of coffee and sat in the parking lot for a while, just breathing. I thought about my wife. She died 6 years ago. Ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. She would have worn her blue dress to that wedding. She would have danced with our son. She would have been gracious to everyone. Genuinely gracious, not performed, because that was who she was. And she would have found me later, in a quiet moment, and she would have taken my hand and said, "Hank, let it go. He's happy." I'm not sure I would have let it go even then, but I would have tried for her. She wasn't there. So I sat in the parking lot at a Shell station and drank bad coffee and let myself feel it, all of it, for exactly as long as it took to finish the cup. Then I threw it away and drove home. Here's what I never told my son. Here's what I never told my son. Here's what I never told anyone. Until now. I retired from the plant 18 months before that wedding. Not because I had to, because I chose to, because 31 years was enough, and because I had other things to attend to. When my wife was sick, she made me promise to take care of myself. Not just physically, she was practical, but she wasn't simple. She meant it in a larger sense. She'd watched me spend our whole marriage being careful, being steady, saving and planning while other people spent. She knew things about our finances that our son didn't know. She knew because I'd told her about the investments I'd started making in my late 30s. Index funds mostly, at first. Then some individual positions in companies I understood. Manufacturers, logistics firms, industrial suppliers. Nothing flashy. Nothing I couldn't explain. Just patience, compounding, decades of not touching money I didn't need to touch. She knew, she proved, she made me promise not to hide it forever. I thought retiring would be the natural moment to stop hiding it. And in some ways, it was. I sold the house in Akron that had gotten too big and bought a smaller place with a workshop in the back. I helped my son with his down payment on his condo in Columbus, $60,000, wired directly, no fanfare. I set up a donor-advised fund at a community foundation in Summit County. I made some adjustments to my estate plan. I just didn't announce any of it. It didn't occur to me that I needed to. It occurred to me even less after the wedding. I went quiet after that night. My son called on holidays. I answered. I didn't bring up what had happened, and neither did he. My daughter-in-law sent a thank you card for the wedding gift. A handwritten card, I'll give her that, and I put it in a drawer and didn't look at it again. Life moved forward the way it does. About 8 months after the wedding, I got a call from a man I'd been introduced to the previous year through a mutual friend, a fellow who ran a small private equity firm based in Pittsburgh. We'd had coffee twice. I liked him. He was straightforward, didn't waste time. He called to tell me about a company he was advising, a mid-sized logistics operation based in the Cleveland area. Solid fundamentals, but management trouble at the top. The founder had retired and left it in the hands of a son-in-law. His words, not mine. I noticed the irony, who'd run it into some turbulence. They were looking at a restructuring. They needed someone with operational experience and patient capital who was willing to come in at the board level and help steady things. He thought of me. I said I'd look at the financials. I spent 3 weeks looking at the financials. The company was real and the problems were fixable. The management trouble was partly structural and partly personal. The current CEO had made some acquisitions that hadn't integrated well and had a tendency to prioritize optics over operations. The bones were good. The client relationships were good. The workforce, from what I could see, was good. I called back and said I was interested. It took 4 months to negotiate the structure. In the end, I came in as a significant equity partner and accepted a seat as chairman of the board. My first official act was to bring in a search firm to find a new CEO. I want to be careful here because the world is not large, and logistics in Northeast Ohio is not a large world within it. The company was called Meridian Freight Solutions. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you haven't. Her father had been doing business with Meridian for 11 years. His company, the one he'd inherited and grown, the one that gave him the long driveway and the expensive wine, used Meridian as its primary freight partner for a substantial portion of its regional shipping volume. I did not know this when I agreed to come in. I found out during due diligence when I was going through the client list. I stared at the name on that spreadsheet for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and took a walk around the block and came back and made myself think about it carefully and honestly. The business case for the partnership was legitimate, regardless of who he was. His company was a good client. Our terms with them were favorable. There was no reason, from a pure business standpoint, to do anything about it at all. I decided to do nothing about it. I decided to let it unfold, however it was going to unfold, and to behave exactly the way I would have behaved if I had never met the man at a wedding reception in Columbus. The new CEO was announced in March. She was excellent, came from a competitor, had a strong operational background, no patience for things that didn't work. We held a board dinner in Cleveland to introduce her to the major stakeholders. Her father was on the guest list because his company was one of our major stakeholders. I wore a suit to that dinner. Navy, well-fitted, nothing flashy. I got my haircut that week. I was there early, standing near the entrance with a glass of sparkling water when he walked in. He was with his operations director, a younger man I didn't recognize. He was wearing a camel hair sport coat and looked relaxed, comfortable, the way a man looks when he expects every room to receive him well. He saw me before I spoke. I watched it happen. His eyes moved across the room the way they do at these things, cataloging faces, assigning value, and then they stopped on me and his expression did something complicated. I extended my hand. I said, "Good to see you again." He shook my hand. His grip was slower than it should have been. He said, "You're Henry Callahan?" He used my full name, which was on the materials. I said, "Hank, please." He said, "You're the chairman." I said, "Yes." He said, Your son never said. I didn't know you were. Involved in logistics?" I said. "It's fairly recent." There was a silence that lasted about 4 seconds, which is a long time in a quiet room. Then he laughed. A short sound, uncomfortable. Nothing like the easy laugh I'd heard at the wedding. He said, "Well, small world." I said, "It really is." I excused myself to greet the new CEO, who had just come through the door. I did not look back at him. Dinner was pleasant. I sat at the head of the table, and I asked questions and I listened, and I was the version of myself that I've been working on becoming for about 30 years, patient, present, willing to be quiet. The new CEO was sharp and won the room quickly. My partner from Pittsburgh made a few remarks that landed well. Her father sat across the table and 3 seats down. He was quieter than I imagined he usually was at dinners like this. After the meal, during coffee, he came and found me. He said, "I owe you an apology." I waited. He said, "At the wedding. My daughter said something. I should have said something at the time." I looked at him. I thought about my son looking down at his plate. I thought about the Shell station parking lot outside Canton, the bad coffee, the radio off. I said, "I appreciate that." He said, "I hope it doesn't affect our business relationship." And there it was, the real reason he'd crossed the room, not the apology. The apology was real enough, I think. He's not a bad man. I decided that eventually. But the apology and the business question came packaged together, and he hadn't even tried to separate them. I said, "Our business relationship is based on the contract terms and the service levels. That's what I'll be looking at." He nodded slowly. He said, "Fair enough." We shook hands again. His grip was firmer that time, like he was trying to recover something. I went home that night to my small house with the workshop in the back. I changed out of the suit and hung it up. I made myself a sandwich and ate it standing over the sink, which is what I do when I'm thinking. I thought about calling my son. I didn't call him that night. He called me about 2 weeks later. His father-in-law had told him, apparently. The call was stilted, uncomfortable. My son has never been good at direct conversations about difficult things, which I accept as a failure I contributed to. He said, "Dad, I didn't know." I said, "I know you didn't." He said, "About any of it, about the investments, about Meridian, I didn't know." I said, "I know." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Why didn't you tell me?" That's the question, isn't it? Why didn't you tell me? I thought about how to answer it. I thought about the flannel shirt and the parking lot, and the way his eyes had slid away from mine across a room full of his wife's family. I thought about $60,000, wired quietly, and a mother who died in a bed I sat beside for 14 months, and 31 years of showing up every morning to a job that took something out of me every day and gave something back too. I said, because it wasn't the reason I was there, at the wedding. I was there as your father. That's the only thing I wanted to be. Another silence. Longer. He said, Dad, I'm sorry. What she said. I should have. Yeah, I said. You should have. Yeah, I said. You should have. That sat between us for a while. I didn't want to perform forgiveness. I didn't fully feel yet. I have been around long enough to know that the feeling comes before the words, or it doesn't come at all. And anything you say before the feeling gets there is just noise. So I said, give me some time, okay? I'm not going anywhere. I just need a little time. He said, okay. His voice was rough in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. We've talked 3 times since then. Each time is a little easier. His wife sent me a letter. Not a card. A letter, 2 pages handwritten, and I read it twice. She said she was ashamed and that she didn't expect anything from me and that she understood if things were never the same. I thought that was honest. I thought that took something. I haven't written back yet. I'm working on it. I'm 64 years old. I've got a workshop behind my house where I build furniture. Nothing fancy, just things that are solid and last a long time. I've got a board seat at a logistics company and a portfolio that my wife would be quietly proud of, and a flannel shirt I still wear because it still fits, and I see no reason to pretend otherwise. I don't think I'm better than anyone in that reception hall. I don't think money makes you better than anyone, and I've thought that my whole life, which is maybe why I never felt the need to make sure everyone knew I had some. But I'll tell you what I do believe. I believe that how you treat a man in a flannel shirt at his own son's wedding says something true about you. I believe that looking down at your plate while your wife makes your father the punchline says something true about you too. And I believe that being faced with those truths, really faced with them, not just apologized around them, is the only thing that gives a person a chance to become something better than they were. I'm still waiting to see what my son becomes. I'm still hoping. That's the thing about being a father. You never really stop.